Welcome to Stuff They Didn't Teach Me in Sunday School. When you go to a play, you often get the cast of characters as you're sitting there waiting for the play to begin. You can read through the cast of characters. Who are the characters here? You get a little background on the people that are playing the parts, but you also sometimes get background on the characters themselves in the play. You might need a cast of characters in Matthew's account of the Christmas story because it's not the one we're used to reading. We're used to reading Luke's. We kind of throw Matthew's in there, and some of us get the idea that these all come together in one package. Matthew is going to approach the Christmas story, the birth of Christ, from Joseph's perspective. He's going to look at it from Joseph's angle. So Joseph will be the key figure here. Luke looks at it from Mary's angle, and Joseph's kind of looking over her shoulder. And in Matthew, he's going to look at Joseph. And there are some other things, if you look at Matthew's account, that are not part of the story as we're used to hearing it. We're told in Matthew chapter 1, verse 18, "Now the birth of Jesus Christ took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, engaged to be married, before they came together, before they had sexual intercourse, she was found to be with child by the Holy Spirit." No mention of the Annunciation to Mary. That happens in Luke's gospel, not in Matthew's gospel. But Joseph just finds out she's pregnant. "And her husband, Joseph, being a just man and unwilling to put her to shame," and you would think the next line might be, "married her anyway." But it isn't. It's resolved to divorce her quietly. He could have made a public example of Mary. Had he lived in Old Testament ages, he could have had her stoned. Now, the Romans reserved the death penalty for themselves, and unless he did it with a mob, it wouldn't have been legal. But he could have had her publicly disgraced. Instead, he was a just man. He decided to do it quietly and let things go. But in Matthew's gospel, God will speak to Joseph in dreams. And so in verse 20, "As he considered this, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David," there's that line again, "son of David, do not fear to take Mary your wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus." That's where the name comes from. The angel's word, not to Mary, but to Joseph, to name him Jesus. Same name in the Bible, by the way, as Hosea, Joshua, Jesus. Same name. He saves. Yahweh saves. "For he will save his people from their sins." It's a play on the word save. And then a formula that Matthew uses quite often. "All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet." And then he goes back and quotes Isaiah 7:14. "Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and his name shall be called Emmanuel." Interesting, in Matthew's gospel, he begins with the concept of Emmanuel. Emmanuel, if you break it apart in Hebrew, em with, anu, us, el, God. Emmanuel, God with us. And in the end of the book of Matthew, "Lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." God with us at the beginning, God with us at the end. Joseph took Mary to be married, and that's where chapter 1 ends. We've got to get another character in here because you're going to deal with him in chapter 2. You're going to deal with him in the next Stuff They Didn't Teach Me in Sunday School lesson. But I need to introduce you to him in this one. He's a character by the name of Herod the Great. What a guy. He is evidence that there is a fine line between genius and insanity. And he falls off of both sides of that line pretty regularly. Genius, he was a master builder. Master builder. He built Caesarea Maritima. Judea had no natural port. And so he built a port. And he did it much the way we would build today. He had concrete poured down into tubes in the water to make the breakwater. Had concrete poured down into tubes, forced the water out, let the concrete set up to form the pillars for the breakwater to go in so that you'd have this calm port. Built an amphitheater there. Beautiful city, Caesarea Maritima. Also knew where his bread was buttered because he named it Caesarea. Named it after his emperor. If you want to be in good stead with your emperor, name stuff after him. So he did. Revamped Jerusalem. The beautiful temple that was there actually tore down the previous temple, the one that was built after they came back from the exile, and built a gleaming new temple out of white marble overlaid with gold trim. Just a beautiful building. Someone said, he who has not seen Herod's Jerusalem temple has not seen a great building. In fact, the Romans, when they destroyed that building in 70 AD, they left the western wall standing with huge, huge blocks of stone that Herod used to build that building because they wanted the world to see what a great building they had torn down. These blocks that he built within the Jerusalem temple, just 10, 12, 15 feet long and thick. And for years, they couldn't quite figure out how they got them into place. How do you move that big of a block of stone into place? Well, they cut them, they quarried them as cylinders, rolled them into place, and then chipped them into blocks when they got them into place. Built many other structures in Jerusalem, a palace, a hippodrome, all kinds of places in Jerusalem. He was also concerned. He was concerned that somebody would be out to get him. Now, we call that paranoia if people really aren't out to get you. If they really are, I don't think you'd call it paranoia. And so in Herod's case, you wouldn't call it paranoia. There were people that really were out to get him. And so he built a refuge for himself at Masada, down on the southern part of the Dead Sea, flat-top mountain, and put a palace up there, had a swimming pool up there. The place gets no rain, had to pipe water in from the surrounding mountains. A nice summer day is probably 118 degrees up there. And he built a swimming pool, but that's not as astounding as the fact that he built a steam room in there too. At 118 degrees, I'm not sure what you need a steam room for, but he did. Had a floor in it with holes in the bottom and space under the floor, and they could run the steam in under there and the steam would come up. Maybe the theory was that if you spent some time in there, 118 degrees felt better than that when you walked outside. I don't know. He looked around. He decided he needed a place to be buried, a suitable place, and none of the mountains were high enough. So he ordered his engineers to take the top of that mountain, put it on top of this one, make it high enough, and then hollow it out so it looks like a volcano today. It's called the Herodium, and had another palace in there and his burial place in there. Just outside of Bethlehem is where the Herodium is. Had a chance to walk up there not too long ago and walk through that hollowed out area in the Herodium. If you ever get over there, take the opportunity to make that hike. Fascinating, genius kind of builder. Also, nuttier than a fruitcake in many ways. Just crazy. He had several wives. Probably his favorite wife was a woman by the name of Mariamne. He married two women by the name of Mariamne. This one was Mariamne I. He loved her. Was absolutely convinced a couple of times that she was conniving and working against him, and eventually had her killed. Had two sons that he named as his heirs, and then was convinced that they were conniving against him also, accused them of treason, and had them executed as well. The emperor once commented that Herod, being a convert to Judaism, said, "I'd rather be Herod's pig than his son." Because he was a convert to Judaism, he wouldn't kill a pig, but he would kill his son. Killed two sons, got mad at the high priest one time, invited him to a swimming party in Jericho and drowned him. When Herod was about to die, he was afraid that nobody would mourn for him. And he might have been right. He was not particularly well loved. And so what he did is he ordered a bunch of Jewish leaders locked up and said, "When I die," told his men, "when I die, kill them, because then people will cry." Well, his Jewish leaders were smart enough to not do that. When Herod died, they let him go. They did lock him up, but they let him go when he died. But that's the kind of nutcase that he was. This is the Herod that's the baby killer of Matthew chapter 2. This is the Herod that Joseph is afraid of in Matthew chapter 2. And we're going to get to that in the next episode as we watch God's plan of salvation unfold in Matthew's gospel.